everybody? Welcome to the Universal Church of Truth, where we are talking about Disney Plus's Obi-Wan Kenobi Part 5. Um, I am one half of your host, Hunter. This is
the other half, Joe.
the other half, Joe. That's what I call him I call him the other half. We respect each other here at Murphy's Multiverse. Anyway, this episode is a doozy for a lot a lot of reasons. There's a lot to talk about, but I'm gonna start it off as I always do. Joe, please give me your overall general thoughts and feelings on the episode.
Definitely a strong episode. Lots of emotional stuff that I think really pays off a lot what they've been building up to. It's action sequences still a little like if it's not involving a lightsaber, yeah, it's just like lightsabers. Like, oh, okay, it's a little smooth. Guns.
Yeah.
But it like I say, I still think it's a very deliberate choice of what they're doing, and it's just not something that I think we kind of grew out of the shaky cam phase. That every time it comes back, it's a little too jarring at this point. But it's still, I think, it had some of the best actions, especially the final big fight had some really good choreography, but also the flashback. I do think there were too many cuts, though. It was kind of odd how often they cut at times. But generally a very strong emotional episode. And Darth Vader is he just tears shit up. Who gives a shit? He just comes in and does it.
that's like, I have so many on and off qualms with like how they use Vader, and there was even some stuff in this episode where I was like, oh, I don't know how I feel about that, and just yada yada, but undeniably just so cool. And part of me wants to like get into it and analyze it and be like, this isn't how they should do this or whatever. And then another part of me was watching that episode and feeling like a 10-year-old again, just like hugging a blanket and screaming and just so excited. It was so cool. Yeah, I agree with you. I think that this was one of my favorite episodes of the whole show. I really liked episodes 3 and 4, but episode 5 feels like a return to the magic I felt watching those like first 2 episodes. I knew you were gonna bring up the shaky cam. I even wrote a note about it because as I was watching it, I was like, this is too shaky. This is too shaky. I feel it. I know Joe's gonna feel it.
The sad thing is, once you point it out, it's kind of like this. Now I see it.
Yeah, now I see it. I've always had a really iffy relationship with shaky cam, though, dating back to Captain America: Civil War, when like a lot of those early action scenes with Black Widow, which was partly to cover the pregnancy and whatnot. So I understand why they did that, but I remember it bothering me so much, and ever since then, it's just like I can't not see it.
I always think of Batman Begins, where they really amped that up, but you could barely see anything.
I think I was young enough watching those movies for the first time that I was just excited to have like a Batman movie in front of me. But yeah, I totally, shaky cam is not for me. It gives me a headache. Let's hop into like the specifics of this episode because there's quite a bit to talk about. Starting off the bat with Attack of the Clones era Anakin and Obi-Wan, which I was not expecting.
I was hoping, because it was like, why'd you bring him back if you're not going to do it?
Yeah. Yeah, but it's funny because they open up on a shot of Coruscant, right? Yeah. Looking beautiful as ever. So like prequel era Coruscant, pre-Clone Wars Coruscant, probably. And I wasn't expecting it to be the flashback like off the bat. Like I thought like, oh wow, Coruscant, that's really cool. And then it pans and you see Anakin with the like Padawan braid. And as soon as I see the Padawan braid, I'm like, yo, that's my guy. That's nuts. I did think it was funny that I thought that if they did that, they would use more like de-aging tech to make him look younger.
He looked a little older. It was like
he turned around and I was like, oh, it's Hayden Christensen now, there was some stuff done touching up to make him and Ewan. I mean, it helps that they both look great and have aged like super super well. Um, but yeah, I did think that was funny, and like Hayden Christensen's voice is notably deeper than it was during that time period. Uh, which it's funny. He said that he watched the Clone Wars in preparation for like coming back as Anakin, which I love that he did that. And I maybe it's just me projecting, but I cannot help but feel like there were some elements of Matt Lanter Anakin in the way that Hayden played Anakin this time, and I feel like he watched Clone Wars and was like, "All right, I'll blend it a little bit."
It sounds odd, but he wasn't. He was a bit softer in tone. He still had the arrogance that I think defined Anakin as a Jedi, especially as a Padawan. But what he did nicely is that where I think Lantern's influences, I would say Lantern or Lanter's influence comes in, where he's a bit more soft, but he's more having fun. This isn't.
Yeah.
I hate sand, Anakin. This is that Anakin. Like you see where he would go into Clone Wars to become that guy. More.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean Hayden's original performance, which I mean I know it gets a lot of crap. I don't have that much of an issue with it. But he styled how he spoke a lot on the way Vader and James Earl Jones did, which makes sense because he figured like just becoming Vader, yeah, his voice changes, he's a bit more of a robot, but he might still have some of the same like enunciation and cadence, and so you get a lot of that like stiffness in his vocal performance, which was on purpose, and I totally understand why he did it. But in this, I feel like it was cool seeing Hayden do that like Matt Lanter, I am a Clone Wars hero. I'm having fun with this voice. Yeah, and it was I don't know. It made me really happy to see these two actors sort of coexisting in the same character space, if that makes sense.
Part of me, I confess, is sometimes you do end up thinking what could have been. I would have loved if every episode built into like their different eras of him being his Padawan, and that reflected the episode. I mean, it's good that they didn't. It probably would have taken away a lot from the episode and would have been a very different show. But it's just like we got the Padawan era we know. It's just like just imagining like the era before he became Hayden Christensen that we didn't really see. Like what is that between era or seeing Obi-Wan kind of struggle as a teacher himself? And it's just like like, oh man, that would have been really interesting. But at the same time, it just would be a completely different show at the end.
Oh, of course. Yeah. We're gonna get into what you said just now later too, because there's a few things this episode did that made me think, why have we not been doing this the whole time? Some of it is stuff that we brought up before that they finally did in this episode. But just while we're still talking about this flashback, that it's the same flashback that is cut intermittently throughout the whole episode. That I love. First of all, I love that they do that. I love that method of storytelling. But yeah, it's that we talked about it this whole show, and I like that they're making it a little bit on the nose in this, which is that relationship between Obi-Wan and Anakin. The fact that he was a teacher who knew what Anakin needed, but was bad at showing him how to do it specifically. And the fact that
in Jedi vagueness that just never works.
Yeah, and also like that way Anakin is not someone who likes to be embarrassed, because I mean specifically it's talked about in this episode where like it's his desire and innate need to win and like be the cool guy who did it and be that great warrior that is his downfall and ultimately his blind spot. And that Obi-Wan needs him to know that, and he's right that Anakin should recognize that and should know all of that, but he always does it in a way that sort of embarrasses Anakin, even if that's not what he's trying to do. And I love specifically after, I mean, the lightsaber fight there is super cool, and I love it. Also kind of foreshadows Revenge of the Sith. They do some of the same moves. And for me, I like that. That
was a neat detail, the kind of
yeah, and it like links where you're like, oh, that even explains in Revenge of the Sith how Anakin knew like what he was going to do next and yada yada, because this is them training for that almost, it feels like. But there's that moment at the end of that flashback where Obi-Wan gives Anakin the lesson, and he means it in the nicest of ways. And this is when I say, like, Hayden Christensen and Ewan McGregor are so good together, and they're both such good actors, and I love it. Uh, he smiles at Anakin. Like, he gives him the lesson, and he gives him a warm smile because Obi-Wan, he's not trying to embarrass him. He's not trying to be mean, and he loves Anakin, and he wants him to succeed. So he gives him a smile just to be like, hey, like, I still love you, bro. And, you know, like, I'm just having a bit of fun with you. But that's not how Anakin takes it, and it's never how Anakin takes it. And you see that in Hayden Christensen's face so well. Like, he looks like he's about to cry. And you know he's not going to cry, but that is Anakin. That's him feeling embarrassed because he wanted to win, because deep down he feels like he's the best, and he hates when someone shows him that he's not. And yeah, and that early inner Vader, and then the way they cut that to Vader going on a rampage, still trying to prove he's the best, it's just so good. I loved it so much.
The thing what I think a lot of people have forgotten about the prequels and the concept of the chosen one at the end of the day is that George tried to reinvent, or well, actually twist it, because the chosen one was the whole point. And if you tell someone, you know, Harry Potter is, you're the chosen one, you're the best one, and pretty much the only thing we get is that he gets a little cocky in like some of the later books that, oh, I am the chosen one, stuff like that. Anakin literally has to prove himself because he believes that he is the one to bring balance. He pretty much learned from Qui-Gon that he is chosen to become great, and he's obsessed with becoming great fast and quick to prove that, because
Right.
they wouldn't even let him become a Jedi because he was that too old for it. So he's constantly, and everything the Jedi have done, their own arrogance always echoed back that they, while he was technically the chosen one, they were the ones who pushed him to the side that he would eventually join, because they themselves weren't balanced anymore. They were arrogant. There were a lot of them. They thought pretty much the Sith were not a trouble anymore, and they created the balance by their own arrogance, by creating the arrogance and the pretty much the tragedy that is Anakin Skywalker.
Yeah. Oh, everything that happens to Anakin. I mean, I don't mean to be like nothing is his own fault, because he does end up making his own choices, and like, especially with some of the stuff we see, he does some pretty horrific stuff that he chooses to do. And that I'm not taking the blame off of him at all. But I mean, if you want to get into it, like, yeah, so much of the reason he's feeling how he's feeling is because everyone else felt like they knew what he should be, and he felt like he knew what he should be, and he never felt like he achieved that, but he felt like he deserved to. And I mean, it's it's basically the same thing that I hate that I'm saying this because I don't like this movie, but it's sort of what like the Joker movie is trying to say, but done with way more subtlety and grace, and is good. So that that's
I agree. Joker has a strong message hidden underneath a placade of, I'll say, a little pompous vision of, I know what films are because I've seen 2 of Scorsese
yeah.
movies.
This is how I love coming on this podcast and just driving away so many people every week. But yeah, it's beautiful, and I think it's really important to remember when this flashback is taking place, which is vaguely around the time of Attack of the Clones. I mean, it could maybe even during. I don't know. There's a time jump there. Just before, just after, whatever. But this era of Anakin is specifically trying really hard to prove himself. Like the Attack of the Clones, we make fun of that version of Anakin a lot, but it's so important to his development as a character. And he spends most of that movie complaining to Padme about how he feels like he deserves more. He feels like he's being cheated out of his own legacy. That he respects Obi-Wan as a teacher, and he likes Obi-Wan, he loves Obi-Wan, but he feels like Obi-Wan is just holding him back. And you see that. It's never said in this moment, but you see all of it in Hayden's face, which is why I loved his performance so much for like what little of it we saw. And I mean, even when we first see him, it mirrors that shot in Attack of the Clones where he's like looking off into the distance and thinking. But it's also important to note, I guess I can't, like, it can't be fully confirmed, but the building that he's staring off at looks a lot like the building that Padme lives in. So I would like to think that they were purposefully like he's looking off in the distance. He's longing towards Padme. He wants to be more. Obi-Wan comes in. He's like, yeah, I'm gonna kick your butt. He has that like Clone Wars cockiness. It's the best. He's having fun with it. And then he thinks he won, and he's pumped about it. But then he didn't, and Obi-Wan teaches him a lesson, and he hates it. Like he hates that, and it's great. I could talk about the 3 minutes of that footage for hours and hours and hours and hours, but there's so much more good stuff in this episode. I mean, if we want to, do we want to just skip right to the Vader stuff, or do we want to talk about this in the order that it happens?
Oh, I mean, we pretty much went through the whole arc of the flashback anyway, and I think the echoing what it does with Darth Vader. I mean, I love that he's not really around much, and then he just the moment he walks in, he does another move. Just every time he enters a room, it's just you're dead.
But I love the way he moves in this too, like with such urgency, because we're so used to Vader sort of like everything is happening at his pace.
Yeah.
So I mean, he can't run because he's a tank, but like normally he's doing his thing, he's walking slowly. When you're in the room with Vader, like you're going at his pace and he doesn't have to rush because he controls the scenario. But in this, like you can feel the antsiness in him really wanting Kenobi. And like when he's going from place to place, that dude's hustling. Like he's speed walking. You can feel the urgency. You can feel a little bit of that uncertainty. Like it's nuts. And it makes when he comes in and just does, I mean, like baller stuff.
He just in a room without hesitation, sees a ship flying off,
and just stops it.
You're staying here.
Nope, and then pulls it to the ground, and then he doesn't open the door. No, this man just rips off half of the ship.
Just rips the sides. Is like, where's everyone?
That's nuts. And he just does it because he's so pumped and fired up in this moment, and so much of that like dark side powerful anger is flowing through him in like a split second that he just stops. I mean, I felt like it was purposefully reminiscent of the of Starkiller in the non-canon games where he famously pulls down a Star Destroyer. Which I'm glad that they didn't have him pull down like a Star Destroyer size ship, because for me that starts to cross the line of like a character being too powerful in the Force, and it just gets to be like too much. So I'm glad that it was like a reasonably sized transport ship and not whatever. Like that made it cool to me. But yeah, it felt really reminiscent of that, which I imagine was like at least somewhat purposeful. There's no way they didn't think about it. But yeah, it's so good. And I feel like this is a really good way to segue into Reva in this episode. They finally did it. They finally made her as interesting as I really wanted her to be. Not that I didn't think she was a good character before, but like I feel like we all knew this is the twist that was coming. And this is what I meant earlier when I said, why were we not just doing this the whole time? Because as soon as there's that moment with Kenobi where you realize she has been doing all of this, turned to the dark side, became an Inquisitor, I mean, we find out later it was a ruse, but like essentially successfully becomes the Grand Inquisitor specifically just so she can kill Vader. And like, that is interesting. We have not seen that character in Star Wars before, and I just wish we spent more time with that character. I mean, in retrospect, it makes all of the other episodes more interesting for her motives and stuff. But I don't know. I wish this like fun balance with Kenobi that she had in this episode. I wish that we had that for the whole series. I truly do.
I agree, but I have to say one thing: she did not get fully redeemed.
No.
Which I liked, because this wasn't her like joining sides with him or helping them get away. No, she has her own goal. She's sticking to that goal. She just pretty much fell for Obi-Wan using her.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I mean when I say like we have not seen this character really in like a big Star Wars project before, in the sense that, like you said, she's not redeemed. She's not a good person. really. Like, I mean, she would still kill an innocent person to get to Vader. Like, she's not redeemed. She's not light side. She's just very much she's dark side in her own special way, and I really like that. And it's like you said, like she's was never gonna like suddenly join the resistance. She's just like, oh well, I guess I could team up with Kenobi for my own dark side purposes, and that whole thing. But oh yeah, it was so good. And I mean, the episode leaves her off in a really interesting place. I wrote down a note that says abdomen impalements apparently not lethal.
Okay. Twist of the episode, which is still hilarious to me. It's just, I mean, I like the idea. First of all, when she starts, trying to attack Darth Vader, that he doesn't even use his own saber to take her down, which is such another baller move. It just uses the Force, like, all right, stay there, stay there. Then uses her own sword against her.
He's playing with her the whole time. She's not a challenge for him at all.
And like the twist with the Grand Inquisitor coming back, which is like, okay, everyone who was freaking out that Rebels is no longer canon.
Yeah. And again, like, we knew all this was going to happen. I just didn't expect this scene to be as cool as it was.
Let's be honest, he was chewing the scenery in the best way possible when he walked. Yeah. Like, look who it is.
He was like, you were never the Grand Inquisitor. Twirls a non-existent mustache like that.
That was, I just love how he walked in, especially because it was like, okay, this is it was like funny and still a great scene where you're just like, okay, he's enjoying this as a character in the universe and as an actor. It's just taking it out on the third sister and Reva, and he's like, I'm gonna take this back now.
Yeah, I mean, he has a great bit of dialogue too, where he talks about revenge being a really good motivation to not die, which is great because that in that one line he's taunting her with an explanation for how he's not dead, which is great because you see in Rebels too, like he's one hateful dude. Obviously, I mean he's a high-ranking member of the dark side, so like that makes sense. But he explains how he survived. He explains how Reva is going to survive this moment, and he sort of alludes to the fact that he knew how she survived Order 66 all in like one fell swoop. And I just thought it was a brilliant little bit of dialogue that did a lot of work in one sentence.
It was a great line. Rupert Friend really pulled it off. Like, he made this character really interesting in a short amount of time, and it echoes the words he says in the first episode as well. It's just so funny. It's just how he, like, the pettiness of taking the Grand Inquisitor thing off of him, and then Vader just like, did you think I didn't know?
Yeah, if dark side users are anything, it's petty drama kings and queens and whatnot. Like, they're dramatic and they love it, which is, I mean, I would not want them any other way. It's insanely entertaining. Like, Vader had no reason to like play like Matrix style, like use the Force to play with Reva, steal her saber, break it in half. He had a lightsaber. He didn't have to do that. He was just toying with her because he's dramatic and he thought it was fun and he was trying to teach her a lesson, and it's amazing. It's so fun and petty, and I wouldn't want them any other way.
I really hope in the final episode that Reva gets a fight with Fifth Brother, just for him to get his pettiness out too. He was so dumb.
I know there was a disappointing lack of Fifth Brother in this episode that I did notice. I kept waiting. I mean, I really, really, really wish there was at least one line of dialogue where Reva got to like tell Fifth Brother that she was Grand Inquisitor now, and he had to like sit with it. And they could have played that two ways. They could have either had him be really mad about it, and it would have been hilarious, or they could have had him in on the whole scheme, and he can't help but make some comment toward Reva about her like not really being the Grand Inquisitor and like a sly remark, and then that like foreshadows the twist at the end. I was like, this was his whole thing, is that he was competing with Reva for Grand Inquisitor status, and then she gets it and they don't do anything with it. And I was like, that's sort of a disappointing.
I kind of wanted a reaction of him just grunting when he sees Grand Inquisitor's back, because he thinks Reva's down. He's like, my time has come, and then Grand Inquisitor just walks.
Yeah, and he just lights up. Oh no, yeah. Oh, that would have been great. I will say for the sake of the breakdown, the shot where we see Vader for the first time in this episode, and Reva is coming to like tell him uh, that they've zeroed in on the location and whatnot, is parallel slash almost the exact same shot that we see Vader for the first time at the end of Revenge of the Sith. It's
Yeah.
the same ship, same location. It's shot almost the same exact way, only instead of the Emperor like walking in to join, it's Reva, which I thought was really nice. Um,
I love the shots of him staring out into space. It was really beautiful shots and just highlighted the focus that he has. He's like, "There's Obi-Wan. I'm gonna get him."
Yep, I even wrote down I really liked. There's like a great transition where it cuts to Vader's face reflected on the window, but it
Yeah.
looks like it's his helmet like hovering next to the planet, and I thought that was a really really cool shot. Which again, just like you, it is a visual representation of like his singular focus in that moment of like this is all that matters to me is like the dude who's on this planet.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, all of that is really good. Everyone was right about Reva's origin. I guess we'll just put that out there. She was in fact the girl from Order 66, which would mean that she's only like 20.
Yeah, she's young.
She's young. She's only like 20 something. I mean, Moses Ingram I think is like 29. Like she's like late 20s, but canonically that would make Reva at the latest like early 20s. Um which is interesting. I don't know, an interesting detail, but I also think plays into some of her like brashness in
Yeah.
that she is young, and people be like, "Well, why would she do that?" And it's like, yeah, that was a really stupid move to kind of walk in and think you can just like strike down Vader from behind like that. Sure, but she's also probably what like somewhere between 20 and 23 and just full of anger and rage and not that like old and wise yet or maybe ever. So like you know, I feel like that should be taken into consideration. Um,
I would
yeah,
have loved the one thing with Reva with her flashback, which I found really interesting, is first of all how brutal it is. I mean, holy shit, we're watching, especially right now in the climate that we're in.
yep.
It's,
I
the
said
first episode was already.
I said aloud when it was happening, this is too much. I said that out loud to myself because I was like, I know when they made it, it they had no way of knowing what would happen right before these episodes air. But yeah, I mean it's brutal in general, and you brought it up. I thought you brought it up last week, 2 weeks ago, one of the episodes that you were hoping maybe they reveal Anakin didn't kill the kids or they reveal something, but nope, they doubled down on that and they showed it, and I was like, oh, that's a lot. That's a lot to take in.
Part of me respected that they didn't shy away from it 100% because
Yeah.
let's be honest, it echoes real world things, and Star Wars has always done that.
Yep.
And on the other hand, as well, it's just like it's so interesting that they just didn't shy away from once again reminding us Anakin killed kids.
Yeah, he done some bad.
Yeah. he far gone by this point. There's no story here of Obi-Wan trying to save his former Padawan. That's gone.
Yeah, no, he done some bad, and I think it played really well into um oh man, I had such a good thing I was gonna jump into right now, and I feel like it's slipping away from me, but it ah it's gone, Joe. It's gone. I remember I had a whole thing. I had a whole thing. I don't know. We can cut around. We can leave it in. Let me look like an idiot here, Charles V. That's gonna be up to you. But
um, speaking of trauma in this episode, I did not see what happened with Tall Love Company.
no, yeah, that's a good jump. That made me really sad, actually. I mean, it went.
I was sad. I was like, oh, the robot too. It was like,
Yeah, and the robot in his final act being to like shield her long enough for her to like do something was heartbreaking, very reminiscent of Rogue One in the sense of, I mean, not to sound too much like guy who's only seen Star Wars thinks Star Wars feels a lot like Star Wars, but like but like I that Rogue One famously has the robot tragically dying and using his last actions to like save the heroes so that they can die so that it's like this a very similar sequence of events. Also springing off of a sequence of events that is very similar to The Last Jedi, in terms of the Battle of Crate, just being like, yeah, just that lone Jedi stalling for time so everyone else can manage to escape. That I thought that was very, very cool parallel. There's a lot of parallels in this show, but Star Wars has always done that. They're always doing parallels. Um, yeah, no, Tala. We finally learned her like origin story too, I guess, in this, which was also heartbreaking. The fact that she played a role in the deaths of force sensitive families and then realized what was happening, and I thought that was really great.
So the moment she said it, I was like, oh no, this is a retirement speech, isn't it?
Yeah, it did kind of feel like that. I do like as well though that they didn't make Tala like, oh, this is one of your thousands, hundreds of Star Wars characters who were like are a
Yeah.
rebel who infiltrated the Empire. Is like straight up in the same vein as Finn. Like she was part of the bad guys and then realized they were bad and then defected, but she did it secretly, which I thought again, like there's a lot of characters who in this show who seemed like your standard Star Wars characters and are turning out to be not that, which I really like.
The one who didn't was Wade. Didn't
Yeah,
get hands.
our MVP Wade. R.I.P. Wade. I'm gonna before this episode is up, we're gonna turn it around and I'm gonna remember what I was thinking with Anakin killing children.
Could you
Because
imagine
there was
if we should do like a video for the site? It's just an in memoriam Wade with like the two scenes he had and the sad music.
I would 110% watch that. I don't know how I would make it, but I would even do the voiceover if you want me to do the RIP. I can sing a song. I can sing what is it? Arms of the Angels or whatever as we watch his final moments again and again and again.
It's just one sequence on loop like a gif. It's just
Yeah, it's just him for like 5 minutes. It's just Wade's death with me singing a sad song that I can't sing. It's just a bad. We could make this happen. We laugh, but it's possible.
it would technically.
Um,
Wade, we hardly knew you.
we hardly knew you, and we probably never will. To hop to hop back into the episode though, uh, something I also wrote down. We've spent 30 minutes talking about an Obi-Wan Kenobi episode without talking about Obi-Wan Kenobi really. Um, which it was just that good of an episode, which is why it's amazing. But I did make a note. I really liked what Obi-Wan got to do in this episode, for a very specific reason. Well, one, it was just well written and it was great, and I loved having him be the one who figures out, with the help of the Force and whatnot, what's been going on with Reva, and I liked their dynamic. But again, I'm gonna keep saying this. This episode felt very Clone Warsy for Obi-Wan in a lot of ways. Um, the relationship he sort of develops with Reva in this reminds me a lot of his conversations that he would have with Asajj Ventress in the Clone Wars, where every time they would meet up, he would like kind of like dig into her personal life a little bit more and try to tip her to his side, and like it would work sometimes and it wouldn't, and she, like that. I always liked that relationship. And two, Obi-Wan, something we didn't get to see Ewan McGregor do a lot of in the movies, but it was always sort of hinted at, was that Obi-Wan he's a talker. I mean, we know he's suave, and we know he is charming, and we know he feels a lot of emotion. But something we saw in the Clone Wars animated series that they made a really big part of his character, was that he was the negotiator. That was literally his nickname. That the other clones, the other Jedi within the Republic army, started referring to Kenobi as the negotiator because he had a penchant for managing to avoid conflict or literally end battles without drawing his lightsaber, by just like speaking to the enemy or speaking to whatever the conflict was and talking people out of it, finding diplomatic solutions. Like that was what he did. So the minute he was like, oh, there are other ways to win battles, and he like put his lightsaber away, went to the door, and was like, I'm gonna talk to Reva. That immediately I was like, oh, this is Ewan McGregor as Kenobi the Negotiator, and I really like that we got to see that. Because this show is just having so much fun with who Kenobi is as a character, which makes me so happy.
And they're using the format of him pretty much being out of practice to kind of bring him back with each episode. A part of me does wish, like with 6 episodes, it feels like we got to a point where we still could have used like 2-3 episodes to fully see him form. But there's a lot of strong elements here on him, emotionally accepting who he is, getting back like this time he just shoved Reva without much of a hesitation, which highlights that he's back with the Force. We had his spin last week, which I love the fact that was such a huge thing for a lot of prequel lovers, is that he did his spin in the stands, and everyone's like, "Oh my God, he's getting in! Go, you best!"
So good.
And I think the negotiation here was a big highlight of that very trend as well, is that he's just back in that groove of finding different solutions, which also echoed the flashback where he lost his own lightsaber and still found a solution to win against his Padawan.
Yeah, and I mean that's always been why Kenobi was so successful as a Jedi, and why the Council trusted him so much, is because they knew that whereas some Jedi, like Anakin, sort of needed the like lightsaber like physical victory to solve their situations. Like Obi-Wan could come up with ways to win that didn't involve murdering people. I mean, he preferred it. Like if he could end the entire war without ever drawing his lightsaber, he would have done it in a heartbeat. And that goes to the fact that he could talk to Reva, figure out what her motivations were, and then use that to help him escape a situation. Like that's who Kenobi is, and it was so cool to see him do that in this episode. Even the way he gives the speech to all the other survivors, and he's just like, yeah, like, if we fight him, we're gonna lose, but like I can sacrifice myself, like I can talk our way out of it, like that. Like for me, like that is Kenobi. Yeah, right down to when we see Kumail Nanjiani comes back in this episode.
It's randomly back.
It's good to see him back when he's like, I'm not a babysitter, like yada yada yada, and he's like, you're like a small child, we can't do this, yada yada. And I love seeing Kenobi whip around and be like, you trust me, I trust her, get her the ladder. Like I thought that was great. I think that goes a long way for, that scene seems to repair any damage that might have been done on Dayu when it felt like he was lying to Leia. Like you can kind of see it in that brilliant little actress's face. So yeah, that was fun. But Leia had some fun scenes in this episode. I mean, Leia consistently has fun scenes. It felt like she was more on the back burner in this episode than she has been in the show thus far, which was needed, I think, for a lot of other characters to get time to shine. But I thought it was fun seeing her like pull the restraining bolt off of Lola, like it was no big deal, and like just do her thing. Like, I'm gonna need a ladder. If you can just get me up there, I feel like I can get us through the door. And I was like, all right, I trust you.
I can do it. But you see a lot of like Leia as a character in her, and she plays that really well. Just that self-confidence, and the thing is, I can do it. Don't worry, I don't need anyone. I'll take care of it. And using the opportunity that she can do it was great. I do love how Nanjiani just keeps making her nervous. You need to get out of there. I'm supposed to take care of you, even though he doesn't want to.
I think it's interesting that Kenobi. I like that they show that Kenobi suddenly has so much trust in Haja that he trusts him with Leia. I mean, I think part of that is because he knows Leia can handle herself, but the other part of it is like, I don't know, like their first meeting, it's not like he would then trust Haja after that, but it is cool to see him be like, okay, you're a bit of a scoundrel, but like I've known scoundrels before and you're not one of the bad ones. So like I do trust you. And I like that. I like that a lot.
I mean, he gave him his lightsaber and everything. You're just like, all right, hold on to this.
Yeah. It's like, you hold on to the lightsaber, you hold on to the really, really important child. Don't screw it up. I'll be back.
I like the fact that it's a powerful sequence when he finds the other lightsabers and everything, like the remnants of the Jedi. And I wonder if Haja maybe gets his own at the end of this show. I don't know if for some reason it's like a
Honorary
set.
Jedi. I'm glad. I've said this last week, but Joe, you're so good at segues on accident. Um, I'm really glad that you brought that up because that's where I was going. I was gonna kind of hop into that little sequence with the carvings on the wall and the lightsabers and stuff is actually filled with Easter eggs that I thought were kind of cool. Of course, I had to Google and get into what some of that Arabesh translated to, just because it was something. It probably wasn't gibberish. The lightsabers aren't any Easter eggs. Surprisingly, I thought there would have been at least one in there, but as far as I can tell, and it seems as far as most people can tell, none of those hilts are like notable Jedi hilts that means like a certain specific Jedi had passed through there. But the carvings on the wall do definitely canonize at least 3 Legends Jedi and possibly canonize one more, um, which is interesting. The 3 Jedi whose names are fully written out as having been like blank was here. uh, one is Corwin Shelby, who in Legends was an Order 66 survivor. Actually, all 3 of them were Order 66 survivors in Legends. So it's cool that they've all been canonized as well. The Corwin Shelby originally in Legends survived Order 66, went into hiding, had like his own adventures, but wasn't part of the rebellion. And then after Luke destroys the Empire and establishes the new Jedi Order, he's like one of the first Jedi to rejoin the Jedi Order. So that's Corwin. The next one is Jin Altis. That's how I pronounce it. It could be Altis, but I don't know. Altis sounds more Jedi. Um, he was a Legends Jedi who famously like he left the Jedi. He didn't follow the Jedi Council. Like he sort of left the Jedi Order, similar to Ahsoka, and started like his own Jedi sect. But he still served the Republic and fought for them alongside the other Jedi in the Clone Wars. He just didn't listen to the Council.
Mm.
Um, so that's a Jedi who is now canon. Although all of that is not canon. Just the name Jin Altis. I
Well,
mean, the first name Jin is taken by the Mandalorian now too. So
I do think that's such an interesting concept that really needs to be explored about what would be if you're a Jedi who created your own order while the big council exists. That's such a storyline that just feels like a perfect series setup, and it's
his Legends sect is as it's often referred to. The reason I think it's Jin Altis is because I'm pretty sure it's pronounced Altesian. But he like that's his it's like called like the Altesian sect or something. And there's like a few other Jedi who follow him and like recognize his belief in the Force and the Jedi Order to be like the correct one. And they like name their new order based on him. So so that none of that is canon, but his name is canon, which implies some of that might sort of be canon. I don't know. The third one is Rogue. I could be mispronouncing these, but the effort is there. Roganda is Marin, who's interesting because she is a Jedi who is from Alderaan, like Leia, and Bail and all of them. And Roganda survives Order 66, but in Legends falls to the dark side and becomes an Emperor's Hand, which is like the Legends version of the Inquisitorius. So I don't know if that's a thing, but at the very least, the name is canon. And then
the new sister that has no lines.
I know, Joe, you really want that person to end up. You're like, it could be maybe it's Roken's wife, maybe it's
maybe it's there.
Maybe it's Roganda now. I don't know. um, Then there's the name Tiberius is carved into that wall. There's no last name, but there is a Legends Jedi named Tiberius Anderlock. And Tiberius Anderlock or Anderlock, I don't know. Maybe Anderlock is just how Lando would say it. In Legends, Tiberius Anderlock, whatever, comes from a very obscure 2003 video game about pilots, and he is a Jedi pilot. Who
I played that, yeah.
yeah, Yeah. So there's could potentially maybe be this. There's no last name in Kenobi, so it could be a different character, but there's not a lot of existing Legends characters named Tiberius, so it's probably that. But yeah, you brought it up, so I figured I would, do our breakdown duty and let everyone know that I did in fact look into what those names carved in the walls were, and they did in fact
Lead these.
canonize a bunch of Jedi that you may or may not care about. So good job, Lucasfilm.
It's always interesting how they decanonize the books but keep bringing elements back from it. It's just such an interesting approach.
Yeah, and this feels like one of those things where like these names may be names that they never touch upon or use ever again, and it was just like a fun thing to have carved in Aurebesh on the wall that like they'll never talk about ever again. But it is fun, especially for people who really love those legend stories. To see some of those names pop up in canon material is pretty fun. The other, I will say, just while we're talking about Easter eggs, the other big one that I noticed was Riva mentions Garel, which is a planet from Star Wars Rebels. It's one of the main planets from Star Wars Rebels that the Phoenix Squadron or Phoenix Cell bases operations out of for like a full season until the Empire finds them. So that was another fun. Rebels fans, name drop. They've been doing that a lot. It's really, really great.
Get your granny back.
Yeah. So that was the section of this episode where I just ramble off a bunch of the Easter eggs that I wrote down. And Joe listens and and I bore him, and it's amazing.
It's interesting because I confess I didn't grow up with Legends, so the book series aren't something I've actively been looking into. I just know bits and pieces depending on what's being adapted. So it's always interested to see how it is brought in, and it's I think the books are such a big part of Star Wars longevity to this day, and that's why it's great that they're paying tribute to them. And I mean, we've seen it with the Book of Boba Fett. We saw it with Mandalorian in some regards. Wasn't Vanth, I think, was also the fact that he wore Boba Fett's
Cobb Vanth was introduced in a book first. He was the first character introduced in a book to then make the transition to live action. But he was not introduced in a Legends book. He was introduced in canon like post Disney takeover.
Oh, it was post. Okay.
Yeah, and then but for like a couple years, he was just like he was in one or two of the books, and that was it. And no one ever thought that he would show up anywhere else. And then all of a sudden, he became like a major recurring character in Mando and Book of Boba. So,
I mean, if you cast Timothy Olyphant, you want to stick around.
yeah. But the idea that there was this guy on Tatooine named Cobb Vanth who found Boba's armor and started wearing it to be a sheriff. That was all from a book, and then they took that and used it in Mando. So that was interesting. Yeah, I mean, I want to get you back in on this convo, and I have a really great way to do it. And I want to jump back to the shaky cam, but I want to talk about it thematically because you've talked a lot about your theory that they use shaky cam as a way to convey emotion.
Yep.
And one of the other times in this episode that they use shaky cam that is not an action scene is at the end of the episode, when Kenobi makes the realization through the Force that Riva now knows about Luke on Tatooine. When he is realizing that, they allow the focus in on his face to be shaky cam, and I clocked that. And I recognize that as part of your theory, and I liked it a lot. So I didn't know if you maybe had some thoughts on that.
So on one side, I like the way they shot it. That Riva finds it. That something, it's classic Obi-Wan. Something's wrong. He can feel it. I'm a little confused about how exactly they're going to use Riva. It feels like something where either she's going to die pretty much the moment she gets too close. But if they have the final battle between Vader and him on freaking his home planet on Tatooine, that would be quite a departure from all the marketing with the return to Mustafar. Where it's just like, did they tease us with the wrong planet on purpose? But I do. It could have been. I mean, it's just
because we saw Mustafar as like Vader's castle, so they could have just used that as like they're like, okay, well, Mustafar was in the show, like we did go back there. It just was for like Vader's castle scene, and that was it.
It's such a and the only problem I have is that it's a really interesting reveal. It's well done, and like you said, the shaky cam adds that element. Though it just opens the question for me now: what are they going to do with it? Because how does it connect to, is this pretty much either it's going to be Vader catches up with them, because we do get the highlight they don't have a hyperdrive. So I wouldn't be surprised if a giant ass ship just picks them up and brings them to Mustafar, and then he comes home and then sees Reva there, pretty much pissed off that he screwed her over. But I think what could happen, my imagination, is that they're getting close to Luke. Like that's the build up, the stress level that we're going to have in the final episode, but they never actually reach him at that point.
Well, we know that Reva is not going to tell Vader.
Yeah.
One, because they're not on the best of terms. And two, because we know canonically the moment that Vader finds out about Luke. Yeah. And it's not from Reva. It's from Boba, like, years later. Like, after he doesn't find out that Luke is his kid until between A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back. So it's not going to be that. So yeah, the question is like, what is Reva's goal here then? Like, does she get to Luke? Because it feels like if she gets to Luke and like tries to kill him, that's something that he might remember like later on, especially if Obi-Wan shows up with a lightsaber and is like, I gotta protect you.
I remember Red One trying to kill me.
Yeah, exactly. So it feels like this is going to be a thing where Reva maybe threatens like with this information that she's going to make a move, and then something has to happen before she's able to do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know what she's going to do with this information, because she's no longer an Inquisitor / like on good terms with them. So she's probably not going to bring it to them. And it like, does she hate Kenobi now because like she feels like he tricked her? Is she going to use it against him? Is she going to go? I mean, she had that scene with Owen earlier where she threatened him and his family, so that feels now like foreshadowing.
She knows who he is. Like,
yeah,
that's kind of the big part here that finally gives us a reason why the hell that scene existed.
Yeah, so to show that she knows where to find him. Like, she knows exactly what's going on. So yeah, so it's interesting where she goes with this. Does she go after Kenobi? Does she use it to help Kenobi? Well, I don't think she will, but like, it's possible. There's a lot of directions that this could go.
Yeah.
But yeah, another thing I want to talk about before we start to run out of time here is just to bring all of this back to Obi-Wan, because it is his show, and if people who have been listening to this know anything, it's that I really like to talk about Obi-Wan Kenobi's mental health. Obi-Wan in this episode, I teared up a little bit. There was some scenes that made me really, really sad for him, because if the flashbacks to Anakin and the events of this episode have highlighted anything, it's that Obi-Wan continues to try so hard to protect everybody. He even says, like, Vader knows that I will do everything in my power to protect these people.
Echoing the opening of the show as well.
Yes, exactly. And he just keeps having to watch people that he wants to save die.
It's Obi-Wan's Kenobi story is literally a continuous,
It's his curse. Yeah, it's just a continuous thing.
It's a continuous loss, and that's always his thing. And I feel like Tala was originally a love interest.
Yes, and the actress did reveal that she was originally written as a love interest.
So you can kind of see, and it's still like, even as not a non-love interest, it's still tragic. Oh, my quality of my camera is terrible. Oh my god!
Joe is slowly fading into the Matrix. This is the second Matrix reference in this episode. Keep happening.
but it's such a heavy thing, and especially because you feel for Kenobi. He's finally out. He's finally meeting people. He's making connections with people. He knows he has to bring Leia back home. He can't stick with Leia, and he keeps losing things.
Yeah, and that's I mean, again, that's what it is. There's a great Darth Maul was referred to by Sam Witwer, quoting George Lucas, as the Sisyphus of Star Wars, in that like Maul keeps pushing a rock up a mountain, and every time he gets close to the top, he's cursed for that rock to come crashing back down, and he has to start over and start pushing the rock up the mountain again. And we see that over and over and over again. And if Maul is anyone's rival, it's, I mean, Kenobi, Kenobi, like the whole thing. But Kenobi, I feel like, is sort of a parallel of that. I mean, it's not quite as exactly Sisyphus, especially because we know in the end he sort of, I mean, he ends up allowing himself to die to let his cycle of loss end, which I think is a beautiful thing to point out in this context. But it feels like that, where like Obi-Wan just feels doomed to constantly be trying his best, and every time it feels like he may have his new like group of people that's like his newfound family. And he even said it last episode. It's like he finds a new family with the Jedi, yada yada, like he loses it. And it's not for a lack of trying to save it. And you bring up that Tala was originally written as a love interest, and I couldn't help but feel him watching Tala die connect directly to the death of Satine and the death of. I mean, he thinks Anakin dies. He loses all of the Jedi, and once he has Luke eventually, and in his mind, Luke is that last hope, he does eventually allow himself to die so that Luke doesn't in that scenario, because he's seen it time and time again. He knows what happens when he doesn't die. And like, yeah, I don't know. I wanted to bring that up, and I wanted to talk about that in regards to Kenobi, and how this episode is just further example. And that's why it's so heartbreaking when you see that shaky cam at the end, and he realizes that he's made that mistake. He's left that hollow projector behind. Reva now knows about it, and I can't help but think the only thing he's thinking is like, I keep doing this. Like he's thinking in his head like, this is my one job, is to protect Luke. And I let my guard down for a second. I saved a lot of these people, which I hope that he as a character recognizes. But in his brain, he's probably just thinking about the fact that he couldn't save Tala. He couldn't save Anakin. He couldn't save Reva the way he probably wanted to. And now, on top of all of that, he's put Luke in danger. The one thing, his one code, right, that he had to fall back on after losing the Jedi. And it's heartbreaking. And I mean, you know that in this next episode, Luke's not going to die and yada, 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 and blah, 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 blah. But like, that doesn't mean that he knows that in this scene. And that's what gives this scene all of its tension. We know what happens to these characters, but in this moment, Kenobi doesn't. And you love Kenobi enough that you are like so sad for him, thinking that he might have blown everything.
Could you imagine that the big twist of the show is that Luke Skywalker died and it was just an adopted kid, just to echo the Rey's ending as anyone can be a Skywalker.
Luke gets stabbed in the abdomen but survives.
Second one, thank God he's not human.
Yeah, he gets stabbed, he gets impaled, but like everyone else on the show, it does not kill him, and then he shows up later totally fine with like a whole new objective.
And amnesia.
It's great. I'm sure the writing on the show is much better than that, and I really hope that that's not what happens. But yeah, I feel like, is there anything else that you would like to talk about, Joe?
One thing that was stuck in my mind, because we talked about it earlier with Reva and Obi-Wan's discussions. They whisper loudly. Those stormtroopers don't care.
Yes. Joe, I forgot to make the note. I'm so glad you brought this up. I was literally gonna do this riff with you. I'm so glad. Yeah, they're not whispering, and I can't help but feel like those clone troopers are standing there like, should we say something?
Commander, we have a problem.
Just like leans over to like, she's definitely gonna try to kill Vader though, right? Like, you're you're hearing that? Like, they're not whispering.
I would love if there was a scene where just Darth Vader's like the stormtroopers know and they don't care because they know that Darth Vader's just gonna kill them anyway.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Is like, is she going for Darth Vader? Idiot.
Especially the two holding Kenobi in that scene.
They're just holding him.
There's no way they didn't hear it. They're right there. And they're just standing there, like, looking at each other. He's like, we could both. He literally's like, I'm bringing him to you. Like, we should team up on this. And there's no. And she's like, okay. And the stormtroopers are just standing there. And I'm like, yeah, you're probably right. They probably don't care. They're probably like, I would love. They're looking at each other like, I for one am excited to see how this plays out.
This is why we had the scene with the clone trooper earlier on. Is that the clone troopers who cared, they didn't get paid. They're veterans on the street, but the new guys getting paid don't give two shits.
No. Yeah. So good. I'm so glad you brought that up because I was thinking it watching the episodes. Like, there's no way that there's like a small legion of of stormtroopers here, and they're all hearing this conversation. They're barely whispering. They like lowered their voice a little bit.
Could you imagine?
Kenobi could have like communed that through the Force, like
Probably.
through lives, and instead he chose out loud to be like, "Yeah, let's team up and get Vader." And she was like, "Yeah, sure." And all the stormtroopers, sorry, yeah, yeah. Well, this was a brilliant episode. It gave me my flashbacks. It gave me a lot of things that I've really been wanting this show to do from the start, and we finally got it here. It has set us up for a very, very, very interesting season finale next week. Series finale, unless, but yeah. Series finale next week. I can't wait to come back and talk about it. I hope everyone has enjoyed our discussion about Obi-Wan Kenobi Episode 5 here at the Universal Church of Truth. I have been one half of your host, Hunter.
And I've been the other, Joe.
We're so good at this. All right. See you, everybody. Hopefully, you'll be back next week.
See you then.